we're lucky enough to be joined by Keith Boylan, Deputy Director for CalVet, representing the Governor Gavin Newsom's administration, and of course, Steve Peck, President and CEO of U.S.VETS, one of the largest veterans organizations around the country. Thank you both for making the time.
Great, thank you for having us.
Pleasure.
So both of you guys are veterans. Keith, you served in the U.S. Army for a few years with several deployments to Iraq, and Steve, you served in Vietnam, and you have been working on homeless veteran issues since 1991. So let's start with you, Steve. Tell us a little bit about your past as a member of the armed forces and what you do now.
So I went to into the Marine Corps actually the day I graduated from Northwestern in 1968. I'd been drafted, decided to join the platoon leaders class program, so I'd go in as an officer, and a little more than a year later, I was in Vietnam and spent a little under a year there. Certainly had an impact on me. I came back and became a documentary filmmaker, but after a number of years began to get interested in the homeless issue, which was significant at that time, much worse then than it is now. We've had a real positive impact, and became an advocate, did a couple of films about homeless veterans, about the combat experience, and in 1993, I decided to switch careers and started as a social worker at the West LA VA, doing outreach for street outreach for homeless veterans. So that really educated me on the needs of the veterans, their hopes, their dreams, and really has informed everything that I've done since.
And Keith, tell us a little bit about your military service.
Sure. I joined the Army, and I unfortunately wasn't drafted for some reason. I decided to go on my own. Still, second guessing that decision. But no, I served in the military some time ago. Like you said, went to Iraq, got out of the military, started going to school, and then went back to Iraq a few more times as a civilian, working with some non-governmental organizations around the sanctions in Iraq and various things related to depleted uranium exposures and Gulf War illnesses and a variety of other issues that were plaguing Gulf War veterans at the time. And then at the time, met a gentleman named Michael Blecker, who is a longtime friend of Steve's, and I've been fortunate to know Steve just as long, pretty much, at a sister agency in Swords to Plowshares in San Francisco. At that point, I started doing advocacy specifically around Gulf War illness, but then obviously got well versed at that point about the struggles of some prior eras. And then just really entrenched myself in all things veteran and veteran services related. I worked in the legal department at Swords to Plowshares. And then fortunately, when Governor Brown came on, I was fortunate enough to be appointed to the position I'm in now. And then subsequently appointed by Governor Newsom to continue the effort. So yeah, really have been involved in the veteran space for quite some time.
And let's jump right into it. So California is home to 1.8 million veterans, and that number increases every year, or in the next 10 years by about 30,000 of folks that are coming back home. And much like the rest of the community, homelessness is a problem. Steve, what's the reality on the ground? I mean, Los Angeles is home to 1 out of 10 homeless veterans. That's pretty huge.
Yeah, we've, over the last really 28 years that I've been in this business, we've reduced the number actually from 24,000 when I first started in the 90s. So we've got that down to 4,000, but it's a stubborn 4,000. We've been at about that level for several years now. So it's obvious to me that we have to do something different. Obviously, there's a need for more permanent supportive housing. And California really stepped up with the VHHP program, Veterans Housing and Homeless Prevention Program, designating $600 million for the construction of veteran housing. And we built or started thousands of units with that funding. There's more mental health needed, more mental health counseling needed. There's more employment assistance needed. So we've done an awful lot, but I think we have to rededicate ourselves and really reevaluate the funding that needs to be spent in order to reduce this number even further.
And Keith, what is working? And as Steve says, much more needs to be done. Would you agree with that premise? And what is working? What else are we working on to make it even better?
Yeah, I mean, historically, veterans have unfortunately always been part of overrepresented within the homeless population. And in California, that's really exacerbated. I mean, as Steve pointed out, it's not just Los Angeles, it's the state as a whole. 10% of the veterans in the country live in California, but about 30% of the homeless veterans are represented in California, nationwide are represented in California, a little higher than that, actually. There's a lot of factors for that, many factors. Cost of living throughout the state, as we all know, that could be a tough nut to crack for everyone, including veterans. So fortunately, as Steve said, the administration has stepped up significantly. Years back, we were approved to do the Veteran Housing and Homeless Prevention Program, which was under Prop 41, which was basically taking $600 million out of our farm and home loan program of bond money and repurposing it for the purchase of homes or farms, and repurposing it for the development of really a housing continuum, focused primarily on permanent supportive housing, but also there is some emergent, some transitional, and some affordable housing efforts represented in that. And that's going gangbusters. We've put out 5 NOFAs so far, and granted about 75 different programs that are in some level either breaking ground, in construction, or have already opened. Ideally, when that's all done, that's going to lead to about 5,000 units of permanent supportive housing for veterans in the state. We're round 6 NOFA. We're just getting ready to announce the recipients of that. We'll have about 125 million going out this round, so that's been really significant. Additionally, in Steve's backyard there, the administration really jumped in and is supporting the West LA development that Steve and his team head up down there, and that the development of that campus for the purpose of building a veterans community there.
And both you, Keith, and Steve have talked about the VHHP. As you will mention, it's the Veterans Housing and Homeless Prevention, and started a while back initiative, and former Speaker Perez had a hand in it as well. But now the idea is that Assembly member was telling us that the funding is running out. So we have about 2 to 3 years, and she used the term that is there's a long runway, as experts know, to get things in place, to get implemented, to get the money from A to Z and to the hands of the people that need it, right? Would you guys agree with the premise that, the money is kind of drying up and that there's more money needed, Steve?
Oh, absolutely. There's more money needed. So we're beginning to address that. And I know Assemblywoman Irwin introduced a bill that to help us create another bond, another $600 million bond. And we're going to need it. Yeah, you're right. In a couple of years, this money will be used up, and we still have about 15,000 homeless veterans in the state of California.
And well, Keith, go ahead.
I think it's important to remember, I mean, when you talk about running out of time, it's a big problem. It needs a big solution. And it is going to take some time, especially to do it right. I mean, you could put up buildings and you could warehouse folks, but I think what I think is really impressive, and what's really impressive about the VHHP program, in just a lot of the efforts of our administration and what's taking place, certainly in Steve's world in the West LA project. First of all, he's building a community, that's just not a building where you put a few folks. This is going to be a community. This is going to be several buildings but most importantly, to come with wraparound services that have supportive services on site that help develop that community, but also help really address a lot of the issues and barriers that the residents there that perhaps led to their homelessness. And also it's going to stably house them, because stable housing someone is very different than making sure they're stably housed for a long time.
Before I let you guys go, somebody, in a couple of times during our conversation, my instinct was to say, thank you. And, oftentimes we all do, people that have not served, say, thank you for your service. And somebody was telling me that as prevalent as that is, that sometimes that is not the best thing, and it never occurred to me. And somebody was also telling me that that is true. And I have two veterans here. What is it? Is that the best thing that we can say to thank you for the work, or to bring you on board as a respected and loved member of our society?
It is certainly welcome. It doesn't begin to address the complexity of our experience. I don't, that they say, well, if you're a veteran, you're a hero. I don't consider myself a hero. I did my duty, went to Vietnam, served, and came back, and that experience led me to where I am now. So I think it is fine. If you ask a veteran, well, gee, what was that like? Be ready to sit down for half an hour. So I think it's fine. And a lot of us don't want to get into it. I don't much like to talk about my Vietnam experience, and there are a number of veterans who are the same, I think.
Keith?
To Steve's point, I would say, just like any population, if you have 1.8 million veterans, then you have 1.8 million opinions on your question. I think that something really might shed some light on this is when you look at the healthcare profession right now and what they've been through with COVID, and the amount of what's been asked of them, and the amount of what they've given, and really put in harm's way. For me, I found myself really connecting with, I heard a nurse being interviewed, and she was very blunt about the fact she didn't want to be called a hero. She didn't want to be called a warrior. She didn't want to be thanked for her service, because what that meant to her was that people were still comfortable. What her reality was, that people were still comfortable sending her back into a medical facility, and perhaps in harm's way, obviously, and really had put in a lot of time, and has been stretched in every way possible, and felt that it didn't quite encompass her reality, and she felt that it was a way of minimizing, or actually looking past the risk that she is going into every day, with not necessarily addressing the risk she went in every day, and in understanding the risk that she put herself and her fellow healthcare workers in every day. So to me, that resonated. So, because I think it sheds some more light, because to be honest, this has been a weird thing for veterans, because they've been the only ones in this situation, but there's plenty of folks in our communities doing all sorts of jobs that have a shared experience that you could say is analogous to what veterans experience. And, people do what they do, and they all have different feelings about what they did and how that affected them. So it's a really, there's a PhD out there for somebody who wants to go down that rabbit hole. But I would leave it at that. But I mean, when someone says that to me, I sometimes are more comfortable than others with, my response varies dramatically at times. So oftentimes it's thank you, oftentimes it's you're welcome, sometimes it might be nothing. I don't know. It's an awkward situation, to say the least. But I think where it comes from with folks is a good place. So I think all veterans try to focus on that aspect of it, regardless of the back end of how that might make them feel.